What if the moments you feel most alone are the very moments you're closest to your true power? What if the silence you avoid is actually the soil where strength is born? And what if the Stoics, those ancient warriors of the mind, knew that solitude wasn't a weakness, but the furnace that forges unshakable souls? This isn't a call to run from the world. It's an invitation to return to yourself, to sit with the discomfort that most flee from, to discover the voice beneath the noise, the one that doesn't shout, but stands quietly inside you, waiting for you to notice it. The Stoics believed in solitude not because they feared people, but because they trusted themselves. They knew that when the noise fades, when the crowd disperses, when you are left with nothing but your breath and your thoughts, that's when the work begins. Not the work of pretending, not the work of proving, but the real work, the inner excavation, the grounding, the sharpening of your attention to what really matters. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his journal, not for the world but for himself, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Let that sink in. An emperor, surrounded by power, privilege, distraction, found his greatest peace not in palaces but in the quiet within, because solitude reveals. It peels back the rolls. It dissolves the masks. And what's left is you. Are you afraid of that? The Stoics weren't. They welcomed solitude as a teacher. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." But how do you enjoy the present if you're terrified of being alone in it? That's the paradox. We crave peace, but run from the one place it lives, inside us. And so the Stoics trained for solitude like a discipline. They practiced silence not as a performance, but as preparation. They journaled not to appear wise, but to become so. They walked alone, not to escape people, but to meet themselves. And they taught again and again, solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is strength. Why? Because in solitude, you are finally free from negotiation. You don't have to adjust, you don't have to impress. You don't have to twist yourself into shapes for the sake of harmony. You can just be. And in that being, you begin to remember who you are beneath the expectations. You begin to breathe slower. You begin to think clearer. You begin to live deeper, but only if you stay. Only if you don't run when the silence gets heavy. Only if you resist the urge to escape back into noise. Because the mind will resist. The ego will protest. It will whisper, "This is uncomfortable, this is dangerous, this is not normal." But what it really means is, this is unfamiliar. And the Stoics lived for the unfamiliar, because that's where growth lives. That's where resilience is built. That's where the self, stripped of all applause, learns to stand on its own. And once you stand on your own, even for a single moment, you realize something earth-shattering. You've never needed the world as much as you thought you did. You've only needed awareness, clarity, presence, because the crowd may applaud you, but only you can validate yourself. The lovers may adore you, but only you can sit in your own silence without fear. The world may call your name, but if you don't know your own voice, all the noise becomes a prison. That's why solitude for the Stoics was not optional, it was essential. They didn't just tolerate it, they trained in it. They walked into it like one enters a gym, not to hide, but to strengthen. Because solitude forces questions you cannot escape. Who am I when no one is looking? What remains when the audience is gone? What do I believe when I no longer have to perform? These questions don't crush you, they cleanse you, they burn away what isn't real. And yes, that burn can hurt. But it also frees you. You learn day by day that stillness isn't punishment, it's power. That quiet isn't emptiness, it's clarity. That being alone isn't failure, it's freedom. And in that freedom, you begin to rebuild. Not from desperation, but from devotion. You read differently, you speak differently, you even walk differently, not faster, not slower, just with weight, with depth, with inner quiet. People around you notice. They may not be able to name what's changed, but they feel it. You've become someone who doesn't panic in silence. You've become someone who doesn't grab for validation like a drowning man. You've become someone who has roots, Roots that were planted not in applause, but in solitude. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That doesn't happen in crowds. That happens in stillness. And if you've made it this far into the quiet, then you're already on your way. So what happens when you no longer fear the silence? You stop apologizing for needing space. You stop shrinking in rooms just to be accepted. You stop mistaking company for connection, and something beautiful begins to form inside you. Discernment, not judgment, not arrogance, just clarity. You no longer chase everyone. You no longer beg for attention. You simply start choosing what aligns, choosing what deepens you, choosing what doesn't shatter your peace. That's the kind of strength solitude offers. Not the strength to dominate others, but the strength to no longer be dominated by your own need for approval. Seneca said, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." And solitude, that's where that power is born, because when you sit with yourself long enough, something starts to shift. At first, the silence is uncomfortable, loud, chaotic. Your mind races, your heart fidgets. You feel like you're drowning in stillness. But if you stay, if you breathe, if you stop trying to run, you'll find a rhythm beneath the noise. It's quiet, but it's steady, and it says, "I'm still here." That voice is not your ego. It's not your fear. It's your essence. And it only reveals itself in solitude, not the scrolling kind, not the Netflix in the background kind, but the kind where you look yourself in the eye and say, "Let's talk." Talk about what? Talk about what you've been avoiding. Talk about what you believe and why. Talk about what hurts and why it still does. Talk about what you want your life to actually mean. These are not conversations you can have in a crowd. These are the dialogues of the soul. And the Stoics knew, if you skip that conversation, you live your entire life reacting, not responding. You become a puppet pulled by the strings of external events. Someone compliments you, you rise. Someone criticizes you, you fall. Someone leaves you, you unravel. Someone praises you, you perform. But when you've practiced solitude, something changes. You hear all those same noises, but they no longer enter the command center of your being. You nod. You smile. You listen. But you don't lose yourself. Because now you know who you are. And knowing who you are, that is the deepest form of peace a human can have. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop, caring what they say, or think, or do. Only what you do. Only what you do. Only what you choose. Only what you allow to shape you." That's what solitude sharpens. Your ability to choose your inner weather regardless of outer storms. But it takes work. Real work. You have to let go of the idea that solitude is something you get through. It's not a waiting room. It's not a punishment. It's a forge. And like any forge, it gets hot. It burns away your false identities. It burns away your need to perform. It burns away your fear of being forgotten. And when the fire dies down, what's left is clean, strong, simple. You unfiltered, unimpressed by noise, unbothered by the need to constantly prove yourself. You become someone who doesn't just do Stoicism. You live it. You embody the philosophy without quoting it. You become the example, not just the student. And from there, everything changes. The way you speak changes. The way you hold space for others changes. The way you love changes, because now it comes from abundance, not craving. And yes, the way you walk alone changes too. You no longer ask, "Why am I alone?" You begin to ask, "What is solitude revealing to me today?" And that is the moment you realize solitude is not your enemy. It is your mirror. And through that mirror, you become unshakable. Once you begin to understand solitude not as suffering but as shaping, you start living differently. Your priorities change. Your time becomes sacred. Your conversations become deeper. Because now, you're no longer seeking to be entertained. You're seeking to be transformed. You stop asking, "How do I escape this feeling?" and begin asking, "What is this feeling here to teach me?" And that one question, that single pivot, is enough to change a life. Because now your loneliness becomes fuel for reflection. Your silence becomes a sanctuary for truth, and your soul, which has long waited for your attention, finally begins to speak, not in noise, not in fear, but in stillness. The Stoics knew this state. They didn't romanticize it. They respected it. Because solitude is not glamorous, it doesn't always feel good, but it always gives you exactly what you need if you're willing to listen. Seneca once wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." And solitude is the school where that happens, where all the theory becomes practice, where all the quotes become courage, where all the longing becomes presence, because you finally realize no one is coming to fill you. And no one has to. You can fill yourself. And when you do, when you become the source of your own steadiness, you begin to give in a new way. You're not giving from depletion anymore. You're giving from wholeness. And the people around you, they feel it. Your words have more weight. Your presence calms. Your energy doesn't cling, it uplifts. Because you've stopped leaking your value in every direction, hoping someone would give it back. You've claimed it. You've sat with it. You've owned it. Even when it was quiet, even when no one was. Clapping, even when your heart ached and your doubts screamed louder than your hopes, you stayed, you breathed, and you remembered what Epictetus taught. No man is free who is not master of himself. Solitude is where that mastery begins, because there is no one to blame there, no one to distract you, no one to impress. There is just you and the raw, naked honesty of your thoughts. But in that honesty, there's something golden. You learn what you actually believe. You discover what truly matters. You separate what is yours from what was simply inherited, fears, dreams, definitions of success. You reclaim your mind, and when you do, the world outside no longer controls. You they can leave, when you'll remain. They can forget, and you'll still remember yourself. They can misunderstand, and you won't unravel, because you've built something inside that's stronger than circumstances, stronger than opinion, stronger than absence. That strength, it didn't come from being admired, it came from sitting one quiet evening when no one else showed up, and you finally did. You showed up for yourself. You stayed with your thoughts. You didn't run. And in that staying, you rose. That is Stoicism. Not cold, not distant, not emotionally numb, but emotionally honest, spiritually clear, and rooted so deeply in presence that nothing external can shake the internal. That's the strength of solitude. And once you've tasted it, you'll never be the same again. There's a calmness that comes after you've truly embraced solitude, a kind of silent confidence that doesn't announce itself, but everyone feels it when you walk into a room. You're no longer trying to be interesting. You're no longer chasing attention. You're simply grounded, rooted in something unshakable, because you've sat in your own silence, you've heard your doubts, you've met your fear of being forgotten, and you didn't flinch. And now you've become someone people trust, not because you have the loudest voice, but because your presence carries truth. That's the paradox of solitude. It doesn't make you distant. It makes you available in a deeper way. It doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. That doesn't make you less connected. It makes your connections real. Because when you've spent time with yourself, truly, mindfully, you no longer enter relationships to be rescued. You enter them to reflect. You don't say, "Please complete me." You say, "Let's grow together." You don't say, "Make me feel worthy." You say, "Let me share the worth I've already found." And that, to the Stoics, is the definition of virtue in action. Not just thinking noble thoughts, living them, not just quoting the truth. Embodied silence. Because Stoicism isn't about escaping pain. It's about becoming bigger than it. And solitude is the classroom where that happens. Every night you've sat with your discomfort, you were training. Every time you said no to distraction and yes to self-reflection, you were sharpening. Every time you cried without judgment, journaled without an audience, walked without a destination, you were remembering your inner freedom. And freedom is what Stoicism is all about. Freedom from needing everyone to like you. Freedom from performing just to be accepted. Freedom from fearing the void when the room empties. Because now you know solitude is not a void, it's a vessel. It's the space where the strongest parts of you have space to rise. The creative part, the quiet part, The part that doesn't scream but speaks truth with just a glance. And that's the person the world needs more of right now. Not more noise, not more content, not more applause chasers, but humans, anchored, aware, awake. People who know their values, not just quote them. People who've practiced the art of sitting with their own mess long enough to hold space for others to do the same. Because if you can survive your own silence, you become the kind of person others trust in their storms. You're no longer afraid to hold eye contact. You're no longer afraid to say, "I don't know." You're no longer afraid to sit beside someone in pain without trying to fix them. Why? Because you've already done that for yourself. You've held your own hand in the dark. You've kept breathing when the loneliness screamed loudest. You faced the aching truth that sometimes people will not choose you, and you chose yourself anyway. That's Stoic. That's strength. That's solitude, not as punishment, but as power. So, the next time it gets quiet, don't resist, don't rush, don't scroll. Sit, listen, breathe, because there's something waiting there that no crowd can give you. And when you find it, you won't trade it for anything. Have you ever noticed how nature embraces solitude? The mountain doesn't apologize for standing alone. The ocean doesn't beg the sky to see it. The tree doesn't cry when the forest grows quiet. They just are. Rooted, expansive, powerful. This is what solitude reveals, that you too are part of that same rhythm, that you don't need to be constantly surrounded to be significant. You don't need to be constantly seen to have value. And most of all, you don't need to be constantly validated to feel whole, because your soul, like the sea, has depth that doesn't depend on visitors. And once you realize this, everything changes. You stop performing, you stop rushing, you stop defining yourself by your reflections in other people's eyes. Instead, you turn inward, not to disappear, but to clarify. You ask yourself, what do I actually want? What am I pretending to enjoy just to fit in? What parts of me are aching to be heard, and I've ignored them because they made others uncomfortable? These are not questions for the crowd. These are questions for the cave, the silent place, the Stoic place. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look." And when you do look, really look, you begin to realize something profound. The loneliness was never about others being absent. It was about you abandoning your own truth. It was about you dimming your light just to be accepted in rooms you were never meant to fit in. It was about you looking outside for the approval you never gave yourself. And solitude? Solitude stops all that. It puts the mirror in front of you, not to shame you, but to invite you home. Home to your breath, home to your body, home to your present moment. And when you live from that place, you stop living to be liked. You start living to be real. That's the strength the Stoics revered. Not dominance, but authenticity. Not control over others, but mastery of self. And here's what they discovered. When you reach that level of strength, people may leave, but it doesn't break you. Plans may fail, but they don't define you. Seasons may change, but your peace stays, because you're not building your identity on shifting sand anymore. You've rooted yourself in something deeper. In solitude, you've learned that pain is a visitor, not a verdict. That emptiness is a passage, not a prison. That silence is not the absence of meaning, but the beginning of it. And most of all, you've learned to keep your heart open, even when the world closes in. Because solitude never made you bitter. It made you better, stronger, quieter, and infinitely more powerful. And now, as we close this journey, ask yourself gently, who are you? When no one is looking, not your job, not your status, not the number of likes or followers, just you in your most unfiltered, unedited form. Do you trust that version of you? Do you know how to hold space for that person? Can you sit with their questions, their fears, their dreams, without needing the world to explain or approve them? If the answer is no, don't worry. That's what solitude is for. It's not here to punish you, it's here to prepare you. It's not here to shame you, it's here to shape you. It's not the end of your connection, it's the beginning of the most important one you'll ever have, the one with yourself. The Stoics knew this better than anyone. Epictetus, enslaved and physically broken, still told his students, "You may fetter my leg, but my will remains free." Because that's where true strength lives, not in the body, not in the crowd, but in the mind that refuses to betray itself. And Marcus Aurelius? He ruled an empire, but he only trusted one throne, his own soul. Every night he returned to his journal, not to be admired, to be honest, to realign, to remember that the only approval that ever mattered was the one that came from within. Seneca, exiled and betrayed, didn't drown in bitterness. He wrote letters that carried fire, letters that still burn through the centuries, not because they were loud, but because they were born from solitude. From depth, from a man who met his pain and turned it into clarity. You don't need to be a philosopher to live like that. You just need to be willing to sit still long enough to remember who you are, to let the silence say what the noise always drowns out, to breathe in the truth that you are enough, not when someone loves you, not when they notice you, not when they choose you, but now, always, still. That is the strength of solitude. It's the power to hold your own gaze, the courage to walk without applause, the wisdom to let go of needing anything outside of you to feel whole. And when you live from that place, you become the person the world didn't know it needed. Not the loudest voice, but the clearest. Not the biggest presence, but the steadiest. Not the one who demands attention, but the one who carries peace, even when no one's watching. That peace, it doesn't come from escaping loneliness. It comes from outgrowing the need to fear it. So the next time life gets quiet, don't panic. Let it get quiet. Let it strip away the noise. Let it teach you what actually matters. Let it show you what no crowd ever could, that you are the source, that you are the fire, that you are the one you've been waiting for. And when you know that, not in theory, but in the marrow of your bones, no silence can undo you again, because you're no longer afraid of solitude. You've made it your strength. If these Stoic quotes helped you find peace in your loneliness, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More Stoic wisdom is on the way. And leave a dot so I know you are here.